So the first question is, who should be the target audience for the state's expansion of online education and why? And Randy, you can start and we'll work Joe and Ed and Susan.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to be here and to participate in this discussion on behalf of the Florida college system. I do want to say that today I'm providing my comments. I'm not speaking on behalf of the presidents or the academic officers from our institution, but I have tried to lay out a series of issues in the letter that is in the agenda material, which I hope you will read. And I really think focusing on the issues as opposed to the organization will help frame the way we look in the future. And I know I'm taking time away from the question, but it would be very inappropriate for me to sit here on this panel and not say thank you to Dr. Nancy McKee for her hard work working with the Parthenon Group and working with all the various stakeholders in providing this information. Mr. Rood, I think the answer is broad. I don't think it's degree completers. I don't think it's just people in the workforce. I think it's people whose learning style and skill set matches up to technology. And so I would be a little concerned that if we approach this just designing a system for one segment of our community. The Parthenon folks said there was not agreement on how this should be structured. I will tell you there is agreement among the 39 institutions on one thing, and that's student success. So whether it's an AA student or an AS student or a bachelor student or master student or now even PhD students, I would say be broad as we look at how online education should be delivered. And I will give you one example, and I wish I could play the video of the soldier in Afghanistan who is from Lake City, Florida. And at night, when he finishes, he goes and logs in, and he is a student at Florida Gateway College, and he is in a certificate program in wastewater treatment. And he has finished that certificate program, and when he's coming back to Lake City, he has a job with the city working in their wastewater treatment program. So be broad and expansive about the needs we're trying to serve.
Thank you. Dr. Glover?
I think I agree with Chancellor Hanna. I'm going to say it a little bit differently. You know, this is not a new idea. I think we're all a little bit overcome by the fact that technology has leapfrogged so quickly and matured so nicely in the past several years. But in fact, if you look at the history of higher education in Florida, we used to use technology to enhance the flexibility offered to students. We used to have correspondence courses. We used to actually send out courses on videotape and audio tape, and that was sort of a primitive attempt to use technology to give the students more flexibility in how they take their courses. So I think the key here is to talk about the flexibility of the students. And remember that whatever we build, we're going to build in the context of the state system that we have. We already have an articulation system that works tremendously well in the state. Students can enter state colleges where presumably they can do online courses or residential courses. They can enter universities where they can do online courses or residential courses. And the articulation agreement affords them flexibility to move in and out of the various systems according to their needs. So I would hope that as we build an online system of education, that we don't talk about exclusively an online system of education, that once you enter that university, you're trapped in there. Because I think the students, depending on their life circumstances, their needs, their desires, are going to want to move to the extent possible within the system to take advantage of the different forms of flexibility that we offer. Having said that, I would just like to mention a couple of things that I think we need to keep in mind as we have this discussion. I've already mentioned the articulation agreement. Second thing I'd like to mention is the SACS requirement. Remember that the last quarter of your education has to be taken at the university that's granting the degree. So that's a very important consideration as we structure this. The third thing I would mention is the brand of the degree. Since one institution will grant you the degree, I do think we need to think about who is actually giving the degree and what does that mean to the student. The fourth thing I would mention is STEM. We have placed great emphasis in this state on STEM. With current technology, it is difficult to do purely online programs in many STEM fields. And so it's going to be necessary that we think about some sort of blended program where even students who are predominantly online take some of their STEM courses face-to-face, because to do laboratories, to get hands-on experience, the technology is not quite there yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Moore?
My turn. Great. First, I thank you for having us here today. I would start with being careful about the presumption that having greater government involvement in something is going to enhance it or make it better. One thing that you can see from the Parthenon report is Florida has a really robust market already. We're way ahead of most other states in this regard. A correction on their report, ICUF has 281 programs with over 30,000 students, and those are fully online students, not hybrids, not other areas. So, I mean, it's critical to see between the three sectors that the three of us represent, there are over 600 fully online degree programs already in existence in Florida. So my caution to you would be, don't get in the way of what the market is already doing. Find ways to enhance what the market is doing. When you talk about target or targeted populations, Chairman, when we started looking at this, and the good thing about this exercise is it got us really looking at what's going on out there and actually bringing it all together and focus. Don't just think of online education as the Provost said just a minute ago. It's not just that baccalaureate degree program. It's not just that single program. Online education is used now and has been used for a long time for I quickly made a list. I've got 8 pre-college utilization in high school and that area, blended courses, hybrid type courses, in-class utilization. I teach occasionally and I use it in my classroom. There's mainly online with some multi-days. There's fully online. And one area that could enhance, and Joe mentioned, is enhancing the tremendous system we have here in Florida for 2+2. Not just between their two sectors, but our sector is also very engaged in that, utilizing online and thinking about how that could creatively enhance what we do in the 2+2 system. We use it for professional development. Just one of my schools, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, has, in professional development, has over 40,000 people participating in professional enhancement and development. Using it for teacher development. We're talking about improving teacher quality in Florida. How could you use that online tool? All of sectors working together could accomplish that. That's another target area. Graduate education is a huge area for all of us to be engaged in, and I would really caution you about avoiding, at the beginning here, of messing too much with that graduate education market. It's robust, it's functioning, and if anything, seek to enhance it again. Don't get in the way of it. I want to also throw out one last point, and that is the issue of quality. We haven't heard it often. I'm not quite sure that I think the ratio, I did quick math of a 4,600 to 1 of 128,000 students and 28 faculty is something that we ought to be trying to emulate here in Florida. What we should be seeking here in Florida is high quality. I think what our policymakers and our governor have talked about is enhancing the quality of education so that when we do graduate somebody, we're sending someone into the workforce that we know is qualified to be there and will enhance the Florida economy. We must be careful in these kinds of programs of grasping onto something because it might look a little cheaper or it may be a little easier to do to the diminishment of quality.
Thank you. Susan?
Susan Paragus with the Council of 100. First, I want to give a brief caveat, and that is the Council of 100 never speaks to policy issues that we have not studied the data on. So in the Parthenon Group report, I think it's very important to see where they focused on the lack of data to draw inferences from. I would strongly urge you, if UCF is the model, and I'm not saying they're the only model, but that's what we've heard today in Florida, that it's a premier model, to look at the sets of data that they're collecting now and see how we can institutionalize that throughout what we have now so that, again, we can give you better information to make your decision-making on. The other thing that I would urge you to look at is to make sure that this is tied to economic need. One of the things that we have looked at statistically at the council is that we have a flood of people that live in the state of Florida that have baccalaureate degrees and are underemployed. Our underemployment rate is about 16.4%, which is about 1.4% above the national average. Our look at the data shows that we need to look at master's and advanced degrees in these areas, and that in fact that may be tied more so to economic success. We also would like to make sure that as we look at this, that these blended models with the better outcomes is really studied. Again, the council has advocated for a long time that we stop funding on the input side of the equation and we fund on the output or the outcome side of this. So if we're seeing statistically better outcomes with a blended model, we would urge you to look at that in the formation of this. Again, I think that some of the lack of data that we saw that I quickly asked Parthenon to send me is that comparison that you will be asked for by the governor or our legislators, which is what is that comparison of cost per completion, cost per credit versus the bricks and mortar side of this. And I don't see that. I think they may have that data. I heard that it got a little complex as they tried to put it forward, but I would urge you, Mr. Chairman, to pursue that data and make certain that we understand the nuance between the differences of the brick and mortar cost and then the online cost as well.
Thank you. Dr. Wachter?
Eddie Wachter with DeVry University, and first let me say thank you for allowing me to come and address the body from a for-profit standpoint. One of the things that we have seen in addressing your question number one regarding target audience is developing the online program as just another modality for the student. It gives them the options. And along with that goes with the requirement to ensure that that on-ground course and that on-site course are exactly the same. Because as a student goes through their number of years towards their degree, certificate, etc., their life is going to change. And they may need to make changes at that time. Some semesters they may be all online, other semesters they may be all on site. The requirements for accreditation are very strict in making sure that the program is consistent between the two and let the student to choose the modality. So instead of designing it for the adult student or the student that happens to be a remote, if you design it towards a modality issue, then it will encompass all people who have that desire to take that position. I've taught in online, I've taught on site, and I've taught blended. It's difficult to teach online if you've taught on site. To make that change as a faculty member, as an academic, I have to say that's one of the things that I work with my faculty the most on, understanding the difference. But from the standpoint of once I've had a faculty member teach a course online, they bring more back to the classroom and can actually make that class even more effective because then they begin to incorporate the blended environment. And that is where the efficiencies come, is in the blended environment mode. So, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The Moocs, is that the right, did I say that right?
Moocs. The MOOC business. I don't understand the business part of it. I mean, and
22 million? You wouldn't invest it?
I don't understand how they're. I mean, I don't understand the strategy. Is the idea that someday your university might buy from them some courses so that I could take biology from the professor at Stanford and have you all provide the back end and the instructors and make sure if I needed some on-site learning? Is that where that's going?
Well, I was going to answer some of that in a later on question, but let me state it here. When I read the Parthenon study and I looked at where DeVry is today, we developed our online program as a combination of number 2 and number 4. We set up a DeVry online entity, which was not external, but that became our online platform. We then used the structure of our 26 main campuses across the United States and professors at some of our other learning centers and said they are the ones that should develop the courses. Okay, so that came in the number 2 part where we used all the institutions, and then we had the one platform where we made the investment to set that up. We currently use that platform, license it to other entities, okay, who wish to load their programs into our platform, if that's something like what you're talking about there now.
But would you ever buy, if somebody's taking art history for a degree, would you ever buy Yale's art history course and offer it as part of the DeVry curriculum?
Turnkey. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because we are accredited through the North Central Association, and the way that we have set up our accreditation is our programs are accredited based on the courses within that program, and those are internally developed courses. And so we have never bought one from outside to do that. Now, we have recommended students who may need remedial work to go and use one of those Mooc courses to gain that remedial structure, to come back and then say, I can then demonstrate that capability to perhaps place into a particular math program or something of that nature.
Mr. Chairman, if you like, I could address Moocs a little bit more generally and answer your question about the business models, if you want me to go there. There are several startups that are engaging in Moocs now. They run under the names Coursera, Udacity, edX, and there are probably a couple of others. Basically, I'll just talk about Coursera for a moment. It was motivated by faculty members who wanted to bring academic content to the masses for free. Now, nothing can exist without some sort of business model, and I think they're all struggling to find a business model. The one that several of them seem to be gravitating towards is based on a payment from employer as the purveyor of the Mooc hooks students up to potential employers. There may also be advertising on the websites eventually. One of the startups, edX, I believe, has made an agreement with Pearson Learning, which is a for-profit commercial venture, which has testing centers around the country. And so you can take an edX course and then go to a Pearson testing center and presumably be tested with integrity, and then academic credit, in principle, could be granted by a university for that. So they're all struggling to find business models. I think some will succeed. It is likely some will not succeed, and I don't think that anyone knows clearly where this is going right now.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add to that as we look at the future of Moocs, I'm not sure that I fully understand their business model. I think the provost explained what we know. I think there probably will at some point in time be a relationship between the Moocs and those institutions, and then the institutions that grant credit for learning through those courses. And I don't know that we understand the financial relationship that will be developed there. I will tell you, within the Florida college system, we're in the process of working on an RFP to develop a Mooc to be used statewide in the state of Florida in the area of developmental education, to be used free by all students.
Joe, when will the Florida Moocs courses be announced?
Well, the University of Florida joined Coursera this past year, and we are in the process of developing 5 courses that will be placed on the Coursera platform, and those will become available in the spring. And UF, in return, gets to use the Coursera platform, which is a technological advantage. They have a very nice learning platform. So we will begin in earnest this spring.
So you think it'll serve as more of a marketing tool for the university?
We're really interested in being on the cutting edge as this moves ahead. I don't think anyone really knows where this is going. And so we think it's in our interest to be involved with it so that we are up to date with developments and on the cusp, frankly, as this whole
Chairman,
movement
could I
moves
ask
along.
just a follow-up to that?
Yes, yeah.
I don't want you to tip your hand as to what they all are. That may be better left internal, but what kind of programs become most attractive up front to put in such a platform?
Actually, we're going to put up 5 courses, and I believe 4 out of the 5 are initially are in agriculture, which was highly sought after because, number one, that's one of our particular expertises, but also because Coursera seeks to make this information available to the world. That was an area where they have almost no representation, and that's very desirable intellectual content for many countries around the world. So that's a particular niche we hope to occupy within that startup.
Provost, if I go back to a generic MOOC, are those typically lectures or content that is existing, or is there work being done with the faculty, and where is the investment in that?
It has varied. Some of it has, initially it was just courses that existed that were put up, but increasingly, at least the platform that we're working with, insists on certain standards and certain professional presentation of the courses, and so we are actually creating the courses. It was existing content, but we're moving the presentation to meet the standards that they would like to maintain and promote through this startup.
And is there no regard to any mentoring aspect of this or any follow-up? I believe the students are grading each other. Is that the current model?
Currently there is no follow-up or student support, as one of the panelists mentioned. As somebody once mentioned, typically you could have 80 to 100,000 students enrolled in the course. These startups are experimenting with peer-to-peer grading and peer chat rooms and all sorts of systems where the students support themselves, sometimes with a little participation from the instructor. Again, how that develops in the future is an open question.
Norm?
Can this move towards an expert, a professor that is famous, and only a few people get into Harvard and they can take him, that he can market himself, and so you can say, I took his course? Do you see that happening as we go forward?
I think it's certainly going to be the case that you will see star teachers or star performers on these MOOCs, and the intent being to bring the very best academic content and the very best presentations to the world. Not only are you doing a good thing for society, but that also is enhancing your brand if your very best presenters are out there.
A little follow-up. Would you see the University of Florida contracting to provide that course as part of your online, so you could reach to Stanford, Virginia, anywhere, and say, in Florida, in certain areas, here's what we can do, and we'll sell some of our courses to you?
Conceivably, that could happen, but again, let me emphasize that this is not new in some sense. What's new is the technology development. It's the web use technology. For a couple of decades now, we have bought course materials from USC in gerontology, I believe, where they had a superb gerontology department, had developed superb materials, and so we bought their course materials, and it was facilitated by a faculty member on our campus. So again, it's not entirely new.
One follow-up. In understanding this issue, I spent a lot of time online, and I stumbled across the Coursera site, or however you say it, and I was fascinated by the material and the courses being offered. In fact, I got hooked, and I've signed up for an Ohio State class in economics. It starts in about 3 weeks, so I'll let you know if I finish, and then I'll come to you if I can get credit for it. But that's when I realized that they promote University of Florida as one of the new universities, and then I went to see what you're offering. It says not announced yet, so that's why I was kind of curious. But I think the lesson here is that there's different ways to reach out to the consumer and engage people. And certainly anybody that would look at their website will realize that we can do it much better going forward. They really engage you, and we'll see how well they do after selling you as I proceed down this path. But I thought it would be a lot more productive than wasting my time watching an hour TV show at night to take a class. But let's, if we can move on, I'm going to let you two follow up on this general discussion, if you would, Bruce and David. The format's going to be the panelists discuss, and then you all comment on their comments, and you can add to your comments, the subject that we're talking now.
Sounded like carte
On
blanche.
Moocs
I'm sure
or
we didn't
whatever
have
is-
all of that.
What is
Moocs. Yeah.
Moocs.
One comment about Moocs and then one about the audience. On Moocs, let me encourage you to look at there are three primary commercial providers right now: Coursera, Udacity, and edX. They're all different. You ought to just take a look. And almost every one of them, I think, on their main website has something you can it's a little teaser that you can look at. And you should really look at them because they do take different approaches. They all have their own kind of learning management system, as Provost Glover commented. I think that's a really key component here. So let me go back to target audience. I think your target audience is every citizen of Florida who is qualified and in need, and you need to work on need and qualifications to engage in post-secondary education in this state, whether that is non-credit or credit. And the beauty of what you already have, and the beauty is you have traditional campuses, you have blended options, you have certificate programs, you have online options, and those students, part of my remarks are, the students are going to make the decisions about what they want to have happen and how they want their instruction or education delivered to them. Now, are there specialized markets? I think there are. And some of those specialized markets you already have great programs in. And so I think it's a matter of kind of expanding that. But I think this should be addressed to every citizen of Florida who is qualified to engage in post-secondary education.
Thank you.
Two brief points. One is that as you think about this, think about the difference between courses and programs. And I think the work from Parthenon is very helpful in that regard. You have a lot of programs, but it doesn't sound like you have a lot of graduates of the programs. And part of marketing is finding a way in which you can increase the likelihood that people will complete their programs, particularly if they're fully online. My second is with respect to branding, you need to think about what you need in brand. If I ask most of you if you'd ever what you thought of Coors Light, you'd be able to respond to me. If I asked you what you thought of Avery's Joe, you might not have any idea what I was talking about, but it's the best Indian light or ale in Boulder County. And everybody in Boulder County knows that because of the marketing that occurs. And it's really not important that anybody in Florida know about it because it's not available in Florida. So I think partly in marketing, you need to think of your audience and who it is. And in higher education, most of our audience that we most want to reach, most of your Floridians that you want to reach, you may want to reach them online, but they're actually pretty local. And what you need to make sure is that you have a way of reaching them where they are and when they are and with what you need to provide. You don't really, actually in the higher education area, two of the most successful online national organizations, institutions are Rio Salado College, which Bruce mentioned. It's out of Maricopa County, Arizona. It was developed for the residents of Maricopa County. Turned out to be a very popular program and sort of became known. And so now of their, I think it's now 75,000 students, about 25,000 of those are Arizonans and the rest are outside the institution. But it was developed clearly for Arizona. One of the other most common ones today is, was it Southern New Hampshire?
Southern New Hampshire.
Southern New Hampshire. It was developed to go outside of New Hampshire because they were afraid they were going to collapse as an institution on New Hampshire populations, and so it was designed for others. My sense is you probably really want to focus on how to reach the residents of Florida. That may be through a statewide campaign and common marketing. It may be through local campaigns. I'm not a marketing analyst, but I don't think it's to think about who's most successful nationally or internationally. If you want to go that way, DeVry has the national brand that's pretty exceptional. or you've got others in the state to do the same.
Governor Colson.
David, I think Bruce was suggesting that when we do this, that being competency-based, self-directed was important.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think anybody who's not involved in prior learning assessment is going to be way behind the curve very soon.
And then I would ask Joe,
Yes.
does that change the University of Florida's ability to play if because it wants to do a different type of online learning?
Well, we have concerns about competency-based assessment. We actually don't believe that the national state of assessment is ready for prime time, if you will. It is something that's in rapid development. There are a number of organizations looking at it. ACE has looked at it for a long time. However, we don't think it necessarily fits in with the University of Florida curriculum or many of the undergraduate degrees that we offer. So I think it would be an open question and a topic of considerable discussion that we would have to have if you, for example, were to come to UF and say, okay, we want you to do the online undergraduate degree, but we want you to give the maximum competency-based credit that you can.
David, does that surprise you?
No.
And from the business perspective, Dean, as you know, from the business perspective, we're very focused on competency-based education because, again, we use the output or the out product from our universities and colleges, so we're looking for quality and we're looking for capacity, not necessarily for credits. So we're very, very intrigued with competency-based education.
Chancellor Hanna.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just make a couple of comments on the points that were made. First, on the marketing issue, and I will tell you that this is a point that I disagree with the Parthenon report about option number 2 versus option number 3. And the reason I disagree with it, it's in the area of marketing. And the reason I disagree with it is because of the tremendous success that we have had over the years with the articulation policy that we have in Florida and with the common course numbering that we have in Florida. And I ride down the interstate and I see a sign for Southern New Hampshire University. Well, with all due respect to Southern New Hampshire University, I believe the Florida brand, and if the 39 or 40 institutions market together, now there's another question about student support. I believe if we market together and develop the right marketing plan, it would far surpass any individual institution's marketing plan. On the second issue on competency-based learning, Dr. Glover's comments do not surprise me. I come at it in a little bit different manner. I come at it that this is a movement. It is beginning. Credits are being accepted. Florida has actually been a leader in the past. 2 months ago, this board actually made sure that you approved military credit. It was something that came before this board and before our board last week. We have been doing competency-based credit for a number of years. Now, the question is, how far do you expand that? Fortunately, in Florida, we already have a system in place with the Articulation Coordinating Committee to be able to ensure integrity in that process. I think we need to be careful, but we also need to be cognizant of what's happening and not be afraid to move forward, because clearly the other people in this field are moving forward and looking at competency-based credit, looking at learning outcomes, and they're not requiring somebody to sit and while Dave said the future of higher education will look the same in 20 years, and this is the second time I've heard him say this in the last 3 weeks, I will tell you that I do believe there will be a significant movement away over the next 20 years from the traditional semester-based classroom delivery system. And to do that, you're going to have to do both competency credits and course redesign. And so I think we are going to have to make changes.
If I could clarify for a moment, because I think we keep oscillating between the particular context of Florida and then a great theoretical discussion. We should not be discussing competency-based education in the abstract, because the simple fact, at least the state of the art in competency-based education at the moment, is it's mostly at the lower division level. And that's why the state colleges have paid so much attention to it. With the articulation agreement in this state, whatever any institution awards legitimately at the lower division level is incorporated into the AA degree. The articulation agreement says that the students then get to transfer in or continue on in upper division, and we don't look behind the AA degree. So if we have a student come in from Santa Fe College who has some competency-based credits, that's just fine with an AA degree. We accept those. We don't look behind it. And in the end, I think as we consider this online entity, whatever it is, I think we're talking about primarily an upper division entity, in my view. So I'm not sure that I would even spend a lot of time at the moment talking about competency-based education, because I think that's taking place at the lower division at this point in time.
Governor.
This is a question for anyone on the panel, but going back to the audience, I'm a little worried, a little cautious. If we lump everyone together, do you think the preparation level of a high school graduate would be the same as somebody who's coming back educational material? And is it our responsibility, or do we want to leave it up to the student to decide what modality they want to go into?
If I could speak partially to that, one of the notes I made earlier of concern is when we talk about cost reduction in all of this, there's presumptions of savings. If the focus of the Board of Governors or any of our institutions in Florida is to target the non-completers, target those students out there who at one time or another took some college coursework and then decided to go back, I think the presumption is wrong to assume that somehow that student is going to cost less. They've already stopped once, twice maybe, 3 times. In order to get that student to complete, the institution that's admitting them is going to have to work much harder to keep that student in. They didn't make it for whatever reason in the face-to-face learning environment, and presuming that a purely online learning environment suddenly is going to be magical for that student and they're going to finish, I think is a gross leap. So we've got to be very careful about when we start analyzing what the costs of these programs are and what's going to be involved in it.
Okay. Can someone address the other one about somebody FDICs, and would they be would a completely online degree work for them right away, or is there no data? I mean, I would be willing to listen to UCF if they have data.
I think that the maturity level and the motivation and the preparation of FTICs varies enormously. So some students graduating from high school would go into an online program and do just great. There are going to be other students who need much more support and personal attention and direction, and they might not prosper in an online environment immediately, which is one of the reasons I keep coming back to the notion of the state colleges and spending a couple of years in blended education or having some direct personal contact with advisors.
We need to move on to the second question, or we're going to
Chairman
be here
Rita,
until 6 o'clock.
I think Eddie had one quick
I'm
point.
sorry. Okay.
Real comment. Our statistics have shown that our first-year students who go directly online do not succeed as well as those who are required to take their courses on site. And so therefore our first-year initiative has transferred from a blended almost environment to an on-ground environment to increase our student success ratios.
Thank you.
Okay. The second question, and Dr. Glover, we'll start with you on this question. What cost models might be successful in Florida? For example, should tuition and fees be increased or decreased? And is it reasonable for the state to expect a lower state cost for online education?
Make certain you answer in the form of a question.
I think what has to be recognized is that online education is certainly no cheaper initially, and in fact requires startup costs, as was pointed out by the Parthenon Group. So unless and until it scales up significantly, it's probably going to be actually a little bit more expensive. And the state has recognized that, actually, because it does allow universities currently to add an online distance education fee to cover the additional costs of actually delivering by distance education. I would encourage the state to make online education at the undergraduate level as transparent financially as it could possibly be. That is, it should certainly be no more expensive than a residential education, because that would drive students away from online learning. So I would hope at the very least that the state would seek to make it at the same price or maybe a little bit cheaper as a residential education. Now, what the appropriate mixture of tuition and fees and state subsidy is, I think that's all tied in with our annual discussions in the spring. So I don't think I'll touch that. But I think it is worth pointing out that many people believe online education to be cheaper, and you may get that benefit, but only when you get to scale. And so how long it takes you to get there is going to be critical.
Dr. Moore?
I would fully agree with that and add that, again, I go back to the market. If I look at the ICUF institutions out there, currently the cost per credit hour ranges amongst the 20 institutions and the 281 degree programs from about $260 per credit hour up to over $700 per credit hour based on the program. I mean, every program cost is not going to be the same. So the diversity factor here is going to be very big too, whether it's fully online, whether it's blended, how much time that student's going to spend on campus. I mean, there's so many factors to engage there. I don't know that you could fix on a particular number. And keep in mind that in our sector, when I cite those tuition costs, that's the cost of the program. It's not subsidized by the state in any way. So the average cost per credit hour in a face-to-face in the state university system is what, Frank, 400 and something?
No, 120.
Cost of delivery is,
Oh, good.
yeah, I mean.
Cost of the student or cost?
Yeah, I'm talking cost of delivering the course, not the cost of the student. So it's largely market-driven in our sector and not so much in the public sector.
So do you charge more or less for online? Or are they the same?
It's all over. I mean, it's some are higher, some are lower.
But by institution, do they usually, you don't see if they vary or if there's any trends?
It varies. I mean, much the same way as we have programs, for example, if we have a program on the site at a community college, 2+2 continuation program, that tuition on that community college or state college site is different than the home tuition at the institution. So, I mean, it's going to be driven by the market and what the cost of the program is going to be.
Okay.
Again, from the business perspective, our focus is on quality. We understand the narrative of cost at the end of the day, and again, I would urge this body to look closely at the data between bricks and mortar and online. It is very black and white from the business perspective. Whatever the costs are, and whether or not you want it to be a loss leader or not, to incentivize people to take coursework that way. That's a business decision. Our focus is on quality. I think the other point that we want to stress here is that, again, our focus from the state perspective is always to drive down our cost and to increase our quality. However, we can do that in the most efficient, effective way. A lot of this, honestly, Mr. Chairman, is a little inside baseball in education and how they move the levers to deliver that. From the business perspective, we're looking at the cost of quality. Again, we can have a very low-cost production, but if we don't have people that have capacity and have talent to meet the need in the marketplace, all of it is for naught. So again, our focus is on quality and understanding the black and white issues between cost and whether or not we want to incentivize or whether or not it's a loss leader for us.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes. You want to go through? Why don't we go through them all first, and then I'll give you the first
I'm
question.
sorry, okay.
Yeah, Dr. Wachter.
First, let me say that I agree with Dr. Glover with his statements there. No sense in repeating those because I believe they're right on. For DeVry, our cost model is the same. As we have increased our efficiencies in the area of providing the instruction as the platform matures and so forth, we have taken advantage of that by putting more into what really counts in this environment, which is in the services. And by increasing our expenditures in the services, it has allowed us to work on that concept of being able to keep the persistence high, keep in touch with the students, and so forth. So, but as far as the cost model goes, we look at that the same, and to the student, it is the same.
Thank you. Randy?
Mr. Chairman, I will agree and disagree with everybody here.
Shocking.
The first thing that I think all of us agree with is that we must focus on the quality of the product and make sure that it works for the student who is taking that course through that method of delivery. I know there's another question about services that we can share. Let me say to you that one of the most important things is the support services that are provided not only for classes in the brick and mortar environment, but for classes in the online environment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and that there is a cost for that. But I do believe that the cost of an online-only university, if you were starting just an online-only university, there are costs that it is a different cost structure than what we have in Florida with traditional brick and mortar universities that are now offering online courses. I think we need to analyze the total cost of the true delivery of distance learning, and that for those students who are in an online-only program, there are a number of functions provided to the traditional student that I'm not sure they should be paying for. And I will tell you that the competitors in the marketplace who are offering online-only programs are doing it at a cheaper cost than we are. And so I would say to you that as we move forward, we need to look carefully at the tuition model, and in order to be competitive and to make sure we have an affordable program. And for those who are online only, seriously look at the potential of reducing tuition, and I think that will help allow us to compete while still providing a quality program and providing the scale that we need to provide.
One other quick thing on option 4, as it's a delayed to market option, if you will. We need to look at the lost opportunity cost in that 3 to 4 to 5 years also in your calculation.
So comments from David?
Very quickly, I'll just make a couple. I think we should be thinking here both of, as I've suggested, tuition, financial aid, and appropriations, all three of those together. On the appropriation side, as you look at this, I think in the long run, performance funding is really very strong, because it will lead the institutions to do, and if you're interested in performance with respect to specific populations, then add a bonus for serving those students. You'll find one of the things that makes adult students attractive in a performance funding or outcomes funding strategy is you can get them to graduation about half the time you can get a new student in. So there are some incentives built into that already. In the short run, it's quite different, because if you really have things that you want that you don't have, in a state as frugal as yours is, there's not a lot of budget dust within your institutions to play around with. And so you would almost, I think, need to have some incentive funding up front to entice the behavior that you might want.
Thank you. Bruce?
Just a couple of quick comments. I think the cost considerations are going to be tied directly to the model that you ultimately kind of roll out, and what it does with the existing set of institutions and their online programs, I think, will be critical. That's at the undergraduate. At the graduate level, I know you've gone through market pricing strategies, and those seem to have worked. I think several of your graduate online programs are doing quite well. There should be a focus on efficiencies over time. There's absolutely no reason why you cannot help control cost through efficiencies. And I think, in fact, the Parthenon Group in its report referenced several things that could be done in that fashion. I don't think they necessarily tied it to efficiency, but I think you could. Just one last comment, kind of picking up on Randy's point. Quality does cost, and if you shortchange the investment, then you run a risk. But I would quickly add that you can have the best faculty member, he or she teaching the best course from whatever institution it might be, and if you do not provide a set of quality resources, responsiveness in terms of student services, that great academic experience can go by the wayside. So I think I'm basically, Randy, kind of underscoring your point that the provision of services that surround the academic experience are really critical. I'm thinking back to our conversation earlier, John, where you were saying, well, I went here and I couldn't find it. It was hard to get to the next step. Well, that can block a lot of things. So those kind of barriers need to be removed.
Governor Tripp.
Thank you, Chairman. The question I have is, calling it a new university, should we be thinking about a platform in the state of Florida that provides to everybody? You know, businesses are out there saying, you know, we can make a lot of money doing this. Why are we not thinking about the fact that we have all the customers, and if we could identify the cost to us to put the platform here and not call it a new university, but a new entry form for education, I asked Pantheon, would that not work, or is that not something we could work towards?
I think we would say that's an absolutely viable alternative, and probably is, I think many people, I think we would say that's a very viable opportunity and something that I think a lot of people has referred to as a hybrid between options 2 and 3. I think from our perspective, we would land that firmly, and I think we put that in the option 3 camp, right? You'd RFP that out and say, how are we going to develop that capability and have that as a shared infrastructure that provides services out to the universities. That achieves scale benefits in the business processes you're looking for. It loses a little bit of the impact in the marketing area, but I think, you know, Chancellor Hanna has a very strong point of view there that is absolutely worth consideration, that says maybe actually collective marketing around the entities of the universities could be a way to overcome that issue.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. You go first. I've talked too much.
Really?
He does.
Yes, he does. I think that's why they put me next to him.
He's blocking my view of you. You've got to yell or give him an elbow.
Oh, no, it's okay. I can definitely make myself heard. One of the things that you know from the Board of Governors is the graduation rates are very important to us. And Dr. Watcher, thank you for addressing that 1 year regarding the online, because that was one of the things that, one of my concerns, and I really want to spend some time on that as well. As we look at this and we look at the online universities, and one of the presentations it brought up with UCF, that they had the majority of the student retention completion was for the blended experience. And you brought it up on your online, that especially in the first year you had the issue with it. And so now it's part of your process that you're putting it into a blended. And then what was the rate prior to that of completion? And what is it now with the blended? And it's also, is it safe to assume you no longer have 100% online programs as well?
Let me start with that.
Okay.
We still do have 100% online.
Okay.
Okay. As I said, we have modalities that a student can do. They can do purely on campus, a blended environment where they can take partial courses online, partial on site, or they can actually take courses in a, quote, blended environment where part of the course is online, part is on site, or a full online. And that is through our graduate and undergraduate programs. The numbers for our increase by going to our, quote, first-year initiative, by moving students into their core courses on campus and making pretty much a requirement in that area, especially in critical thinking, first math course, first English course, et cetera, moved up about 4 to 5%. Okay, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember the 4 to 5% increase in persistence from first year initiative to second year.
Okay. Do you know, because as we look here, on one of the slides as well, they have like the great graduation rate and what they think is year 10. For your courses, what is the percent of graduation rate or student completion for the blended and then some of the others? Because, I mean, before we look at, we're looking at cost, we're looking at how much it's going to cost to us, which ones are the 4 that we're looking at. I want to know from historical what it is with graduation rates, because I would hate to go and embark on something where the graduation rates are going to be low.
Mm-hmm. I don't have those numbers with me. I'm sorry, but I'll be glad to give it.
I'd like to speak to that, because I think what you need to be cautious on is a presumption of graduation rate focused on a particular student, the likelihood of that student graduating with a degree from somewhere. I think what will happen as we expand online offerings, blend those into the normal curriculum, students transferring back and forth, or perhaps being at an ICUF institution and taking some coursework at the University of Florida or online, we're going to have to visit the traditional iPads concept of graduation rate that we all get graded upon, because that number is likely to be highly damaged the more inventive we are and the more collaborative we are amongst institutions. So there's a real caution there. Some of the traditional accountability measures that we're all now being judged increasingly on will become more problematic the more institutions that are involved in any given student's education.
I'd follow up with that. The majority of our students are not freshmen coming in that we can monitor for 4 years. And so therefore, that becomes a smaller component of our graduation rate, and therefore, you're exactly right. To be measured on something like that, the field has changed in over the years, with the students moving around, taking courses at different places. That number probably needs to be revisited if we're going to be measured on something of that state.
But the good news is, they said years ago that we couldn't do common course numbering and that we couldn't do articulation across, and we've accomplished that. Florida is really a lead state in the nation on that. So again, it may be challenging now, but I do think we have the capacity to figure out what the criteria would be to judge, to make decisions on. It's possible.
Dean?
Dr. Walker, maybe this is yours, or maybe it's Bruce or David or any of you. I watched a student take a mandatory high school class online this summer, and it was normal. What surprised me about it, it was an online course, but she talked to a teacher once a week, and she had regular email correspondence with the teacher during the week, and if she didn't get her online work done on time, her parents found out about it by
warning signals.
So when we talk about in college, the college experience, is the college online experience, wholly online experience, not hybrid, is it devoid of any interaction with faculty, or is there something similar to that?
No. It is chock full of, the better courses are chock full of engagement. This is the fascinating kind of double-edged sword with the Moocs, because we're all excited about the Moocs, but it is, I mean, you were viewing that lecture. It's great, but as Provost Glover said earlier, there's no follow-up. There's no interaction. You're kind of on your own in terms of that learning environment. In the better online courses, and we could pick dozens of institutions to look at, there's far greater interaction. The student engages with his or her faculty member far more than they do in a traditional classroom setting, and they engage with their fellow students as well. That's one of the beauties of these courses. It's one of the upsides of these courses.
And how do you do that and self-direct it at the same time? I mean, if you can start your class almost any time you want to and go through the curriculum, as quickly as you want to, it must make it complicated, because these professors got to be on duty 24/7.
One of the things that one of the points that one of my professors made, one of my very good professors who likes to teach online, said there is no back of the classroom online. Everybody sits in the front row, because everyone must participate on an equal level, and the professor knows that. Okay, you don't have to throw the eraser at the back of the room, type of thing. So therefore, but the follow-up is there, and the online courses that we use have those requirements: daily, weekly interaction that is measured, that is followed up, and that translates into the support services part, so that if a student is having problems, it's reported to their student services area to say this student is having difficulty in this, the tutoring center gets involved, things of that nature. So there is a methodology set up and can be set up to make sure that we can take care of that student. Now, we can't call the parents because of the FERPA and everything else. I love that when parents call me and says, I'm paying the bill, but I want to know how they're doing. I'm saying, no, you better ask Johnny, So, anyhow, but there is that follow-up.
I've also heard anecdotally that ADHD students find the online easier for them because they can go back and review it multiple times as opposed to just the one point of entry on the discussion.
Bruce, let me ask you, my understanding is that most of these classes are structured, have a start and a stop and weekly assignments. But then I also hear there's other classes that you can sign up and take on your own schedule. What is the universe of online classes at this point? Is that a very small subset, or is that, how do we differentiate among ourselves on what model we're looking at here?
The standard, it is typically the case that most online courses fit the existing academic structures of the institutions that are providing them. And that is done for a variety of reasons. In particular, you don't want to have to come face-to-face with a registrar who's saying, what do you mean we got to register a student every week? And financial aid and a variety of other services that we provide through our institutions.
Okay.
The movement, however, is to shorter terms, additional engagement, and in some of these instances, moving to strategies that allow the student to move at his or her pace. So it's self-paced or self-directed. I think that was the term that was used earlier. Far greater challenge for faculty, no question about that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to our, what will be the final question. I think and then we'll have more time to discuss it, because I think it's a little bit better to spend more time on fewer questions and have more engagement from everybody. So I'd like to ask, what structure for online education holds the most promise for increasing degree production? And here's your opportunity to say, what would you all like to see? And I think we kind of cut short a little bit of the competency-based versus credit-based discussion. So if you want to throw that in there, feel free. And I believe, was it your turn, Ed?
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead and start.
As we move into Final Jeopardy.
Yes, exactly right. Let's see if you can get it. If you can win, it's a big prize. If you win, government stays out of your life.
How much I'm willing to gamble.
But if you lose, watch out. We'll fix you.
Yeah. I get to come back tomorrow. Is it the deal? Okay.
We'll make you better.
There are 4 options that were presented in the Parthenon report, but what I would say is that what, in my view, you would be better served doing is examining the assets that are already here, and I'll keep talking about them as assets. There's a lot of time and money invested by all the sectors, all 5 different sectors in post-secondary education in Florida, in online education, that needs to be incorporated into whatever you do. So my preference, and Governor Tripp mentioned, I think what I would like to see done here is that Florida find a group, form a group, use groups that might already be there to serve as an expediting function and perhaps an administrative function to some degree. I would take issue with some of the presumptions of cost savings. If the institutions that are already offering online education are incorporating this into their registration, incorporating it into their financial aid programs, it's already a part of all of what we do. So you can't presume that if you created a new institution, it's going to save all of that, or if you have a lead institution, it's going to save all of that. It might actually be redundant, and it may actually increase your costs, as often happens when government gets engaged in something. It drives up costs. Embrace the market is my one strong admonition to you. Embrace what's there and assume that the institutions engaged in this are already responsive When you talk about time to degree and you talk about some institutions expediting time to degree and offering alternatives, I think you will see institutions moving into some offering the traditional, it's going to take a semester's worth of time, even though it's online. This is the calendar we're going to work on. Some of them have already moved to 6-week modules per course, where you're only taking one course at a time rather than taking 5. And then there are some people out in the universe of people willing to take online education that don't want to or can't afford the time to expedite. They're working, they have families, they're trying to fit in a course into all of that, or 2 or 3 courses into all of that. They're not going to get done faster in a semester. They can't do it. They don't have the time to do it. So all of those options are available out there and will increasingly be available out there. The burden on Florida to try to stand out compared to what the rest of the world is doing or what the other states in this country are doing is to serve to enhance what's going on now, perhaps find means of enhancing collaboration, whether it's shared courses, whether it's increased articulation, whether it's rebranding of courses that already exist, which is already going on nationally. There are all kinds of options. But embrace all of those options would be my preference.
Thank you.